This is the story of the Painted Ship, the infamous mutiny on the HMS Wager, an 18th century naval disaster, a story of survival, betrayal, and justice that was swept under the tides of history. But what happened on board the Wager, and why did it leave the Royal Navy forever changed? Stay tuned as we dive deep into a chapter of history you probably never knew existed. It all begins in the year 1740. The British Empire is engulfed in the War of Jenkins's Ear, a conflict with Spain that spanned the Caribbean and the Americas. The Royal Navy assembled a squadron led by Commodore George Anson to raid Spanish territories and capture wealth along the coasts of South America. Among the ships in this squadron was the HMS Wager, a former merchant vessel converted into a warship. Unassuming and slow, the Wager seemed ill-suited for its task. But fate had other plans. The expedition itself was doomed from the start. Harsh weather, poor navigation, and disease plagued the fleet. Scurvy, a vitamin C deficiency, tore through crews like wildfire. By the time the Wager separated from the squadron during a storm, its men were already on the brink of collapse. The ship, battered and broken, was driven aground on the rocky coast of Patagonia in present-day Chile. Imagine the scene. A jagged, desolate coast, the restless Pacific crashing into cliffs. For the 100-odd survivors aboard the Wager, the shipwreck began the real trial. Supplies were limited, the weather unforgiving, and tensions running high. Leadership was quickly put to the test. Captain David Cheap, immobilized by a dislocated shoulder, attempted to rally the crew. Yet his efforts bred dissent. Many disapproved of his strict command style, especially in such a desperate situation. As the days wore on, mutiny brewed among the men. Accusations of hoarding rations, favoritism, and an inability to secure survival grew louder. The once disciplined crew fractured into cliques and factions. A fateful moment came when one sailor, John Duck, was shot by Captain Cheap for apparent insubordination. What seemed like discipline to some was an act of tyranny to others. Then came the fateful split. Disillusioned with Cheap's leadership, a group of men, led by navigator John Bulkley, decided to abandon the captain and attempt their perilous return to Britain by sea. They seized a salvaged longboat, repurposed into a makeshift vessel, and left to navigate thousands of miles of treacherous ocean. But the Wager's saga takes an even darker turn. Those left behind faced starvation and constant arguments. The Patagonian wilderness swallowed many, and the question of morality became a luxury they could no longer afford. Some resorted to scavenging, while others searched desperately for native assistance, coming into contact with the Kawaiskar, an indigenous people. This interaction, though brief, brought hope and heartbreak. Fast forward to Bulkley and his group. Their journey was nothing short of miraculous. Fighting off hunger, dehydration, and hostile encounters with the elements, they managed to reach the Brazilian coast after months of despair. Meanwhile, Captain Cheap and a smaller group also managed to find their way across South America. But rather than being celebrated as heroes, the survivors brought international scandal. Why? Because upon their return to Britain, contradictory stories about what exactly happened on the Wager ignited debates and tarnished the image of the Royal Navy. Bulkley accused Cheap of incompetence and tyranny, while Cheap labelled Bulkley a mutineer. Both men published conflicting narratives in memoirs, creating a media frenzy at the time. The Admiralty even convened trials to determine the true course of events. The consequences of the Wager mutiny went far beyond its survivors. For the Royal Navy, it became a cautionary tale about leadership, discipline, and the survival of crews under extreme circumstances. Interestingly, these events had a long-lasting cultural impact. Some historians believe the Wager's story influenced the writings of fictional survival tales, including aspects of William Golding's Lord of the Flies. The Wager wreck is still a point of interest for naval archaeologists. Artifacts from the lost ship serve as silent testaments to this extraordinary saga. Moreover, indigenous stories about the shipwreck, passed down through generations of Kawaiskar, add depth to the narrative. In many ways, The tragedy and mutiny of the HMS Wager highlight a universal struggle, the clash between authority and survival, the blurred lines of morality when humanity is pushed to its limits. It's a tale not just of loss, but of resilience, defiance, and the indomitable will of people to adapt, even when society unravels. So, what became of Captain Cheap and John Bulkley? Cheap remained in naval service but never regained his former reputation. Bulkley faded into obscurity despite his incredible feat of survival. Yet their stories, part factual and part myth, continue to resonate. Think about it. An ill-fated shipwreck, a rebellion, a perilous journey across uncharted waters, and a fight over truth and morality. The Wager Mutiny is more than a historical curiosity. It's a reminder of what unites and divides us during our darkest hours. Next time you think of mutinies or survival stories, spare a thought for the HMS Wager and its crew. Humanity laid bare against the elements. And remember, history hides its gems in the most unexpected places. Join me next time as we uncover yet another forgotten chapter of our past.